The heavy oak door to my study was my sanctuary, my fortress against a world I fought to control. But tonight, it offered no escape. "You're running from something, Jedediah," she said, her voice a low fire in the stillness of the house. I turned from the doorway, my hand on the cold brass knob, ready to retreat into the familiar comfort of ledgers and maps. "I'm not running," I growled, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "Don't," she commanded, and in 2 strides, she closed the distance between us. Her hand shot out, grabbing my arm. Her grip wasn't forceful, but it was unbreakable, charged with a power I was only just beginning to understand. "Look at me." I was forced to meet her gaze. In the depths of her eyes, I saw not the meek woman I thought I had married, but a storm of emotion that mirrored my own. "You've been running from me, from us, from everything we could be," she whispered, her voice trembling with a passion that cracked the very foundations of my carefully constructed world. "I won't let you keep doing this." And in that moment, I knew she was right. I was running from the one thing more wild and untamable than the Texas plains, my own heart. Part 1. The Bargain. My name is Jedediah Stone, and I was born with the weight of an empire on my shoulders. The Stone Cattle Company wasn't just a business. It was a dynasty carved from the unforgiving soil of Texas. My father, Silas Stone, was a man forged from the same hard earth, relentless, driven, and with a belief that emotion was a currency for fools. I carry a memory of him from when I was 10 years old. My favorite mare, Willow, had broken her leg in a gully. I had wept, pleading with him to call the doctor, to do something. He stood over the suffering animal, his face like granite, then drew his pistol. The shot echoed across the plains, silencing my tears. He looked down at me, his eyes cold steel. "There's no profit in sentiment, boy," he'd said, his voice like stones grinding together. "Tears don't mend bones or fatten cattle. Remember that." I never forgot. I took his words as gospel. I built my world on the foundations he laid: cattle, land, and profit margins. The ranch was my pride, my purpose, and I poured every ounce of my being into it, leaving no room for the frivolous distractions that occupied other men my age. Yet, in the dead of night, when the only sound was the lonely cry of a coyote, a hollow ache would settle deep in my chest. I was the king of a vast and lonely kingdom. On my 30th birthday, Silas declared my reign incomplete. "You've expanded the herds, secured the water rights," he stated, his eyes scanning me as if I were a prize bull. "But a legacy needs a lineage. An empire needs an empress, even a quiet one. It's time you took a wife." The idea was as appealing as a rattlesnake in my boot. Marriage to me was a liability, a tangled mess of feelings and expectations that could derail the cold, hard logic of business. But my father, a master strategist, had already moved the pieces on the board. He had arranged a match. The bride-to-be was Clara Mae Thompson, the only daughter of the Thompson Ranch. The Thompsons were old blood, their name once as respected as our own, but drought and disease had bled their fortune dry. Silas had sent me to inspect the assets a week prior, under the guise of a neighborly visit. I saw it all firsthand. Fences held together with rusted wire and hope. Cattle too thin, their ribs showing like ripples in a pond. And I saw her father, a man whose pride was the only thing holding his spine straight, his eyes full of a quiet desperation. The once great Thompson Ranch was dying. "This isn't a marriage, Jedediah," Silas explained later, a rare glimmer of strategic delight in his eyes. "It's an acquisition. We absorb their land, their name, and in return, we save them from ruin. It's a perfect bargain. Practical, logical, devoid of sentiment. It was the language I understood. I had seen Clara Mae at that visit. She served us water on the porch, her movements quiet and efficient, her eyes downcast. My memory from the county fair years ago was accurate. She was plain, not like the saloon girls in Fort Worth with their painted smiles and bold laughter, nor like the polished daughters of East Coast bankers. She was a creature of the dust and the wind, unassuming and, I presumed, unremarkable. She was bred for duty, a quiet, meek woman who would understand her place. That was all I needed to know. I agreed to the bargain. The wedding was as stark and functional as the contract that bound our families. It was held on the porch of the Thompson homestead. The peeling paint and warped floorboards seemed to cry out their defeat. There were no bells, no fine decorations, just the sighing of the wind and the nervous shuffling of her few remaining family members. As I stood waiting, I felt the immense weight of the transaction. Then she appeared, walking beside her father. Her dress was simple, a high-collared, practical garment of pale cotton that did nothing to flatter her figure or catch the eye. It was the dress of a woman who did not wish to be seen. As she reached the altar and her father placed her hand in mine, her skin was cool and steady. I had expected a tremor of fear or reluctance. There was none. She lifted her head, and her eyes met mine for a fleeting second. They weren't downcast or fearful. They were clear, deep, and held a surprising stillness, a resolve I mistook for resignation. As the preacher spoke his hollow words about union and devotion, I felt a flicker of something. Not pity, but a cold certainty. This would be easy. She had the quiet fortitude of a beast of burden, resigned to its harness. She would demand nothing, and I would give nothing beyond the security of my name. Our lives would run on parallel tracks, never truly touching. It was, after all, just business. Part 2. The Silent Partner. The first few months of our marriage were defined by a profound and unsettling silence. We lived under the same roof at the heart of the Stone Empire, a grand ranch house my grandfather had built to intimidate his rivals, but our worlds remained galaxies apart. I would rise before dawn, my mind already consumed with the day's work, and return long after the sun had bled from the sky, too weary for anything but a glass of whiskey and the solitude of my study. Our dinners were exercises in quiet tension. The dining room was vast, the table a long stretch of polished mahogany that felt more like a battlefield than a place of communion. The only sounds were the rhythmic ticking of the great-grandfather clock in the hall and the precise, near-silent clinking of Clara's fork against her plate. I would sit at one end, she at the other, the distance between us an unbridgeable canyon. I'd run numbers in my head, cattle prices, feed costs, payroll, while she ate with a slow, deliberate grace that I found infuriatingly placid. What was she thinking about? The weather? The stitching on the tablecloth? Her placid exterior offered no clues. She was a ghost in my house. A quiet presence at the dinner table, a shadow passing in the hallway. She was not unpleasant. In fact, she managed the household with an unnerving efficiency that surpassed even my mother's legendary standards. The meals were always on time, the house was immaculate, the linen smelled of lavender and sunshine. One afternoon, I walked past the kitchen and overheard our cook, Maria, a woman who had been with us for 40 years and feared no one, not even my father. She was speaking with one of the younger maids. No, you use the cool water for that stain, Maria was saying, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. The missus showed me. She says her mother taught her that hot water just sets the blood. She has a remedy for everything. That one. A kind heart, too. Asked about my son's cough and had a poultice sent over the very next day. I paused, hidden from view. My wife, the silent ghost, was leaving these small ripples of kindness and competence in her wake. The staff, who had been loyal but wary of any newcomer, spoke of her with a quiet reverence. It was a small thing, a conversation not meant for my ears, but it planted a seed of dissonant information in my well-ordered mind. My attempts to engage her remained fruitless. The price of beef is up in Kansas City, I'd announce over the vast expanse of the dinner table. That's good news for the ranch, she would reply, her voice even, revealing nothing. No follow-up. No curiosity. It was like talking to a beautifully carved statue. Her silence began to grate on me. It wasn't the meekness I had expected. It was a wall. A quiet, impenetrable fortress that made me feel like an outsider in my own home. The mystery of her deepened one moonlit night. I was returning late from a long ride, checking on a distant herd. As I approached the stables, I heard a sound, a low, melodic humming. I tethered my horse and moved silently towards the source. There, in the large central stall, bathed in a silver shaft of moonlight, was Clara. She was with Diablo, my stallion, a notoriously ill-tempered beast of black muscle and fury that only I could handle. My first instinct was to yell, to warn her away before she was hurt. But I froze, hidden in the shadows. She wasn't trying to ride him. She was standing perfectly still, one hand resting on the powerful, tense line of his neck. He wasn't tied up. He could have bolted, bitten, or kicked her into oblivion at any moment. Yet he stood as if enchanted, his head lowered, his ears soft, listening as she murmured to him in a low, soft voice, too quiet for me to make out the words. It was a language of pure feeling, of calm strength. The moonlight caught the dust motes dancing in the air around them, creating a scene so bizarre, so sacred, it felt like I was spying on a secret ritual. I retreated as silently as I came, my heart pounding with a strange new rhythm. Who was this woman? This quiet, unassuming wife who could tame a devil with a whisper. The image burned itself into my mind. I had assumed she was a blank canvas, a simple addition to my household. But the woman who could soothe Diablo was not simple. She was something else entirely, something hidden. The silence I had mistaken for meekness might in fact be a different kind of strength, a patient, observant power that I had been too arrogant to see. For the first time, a sliver of real doubt pierced my certainty. In this cold, calculated bargain, I began to wonder who exactly had gotten the better deal. Part 3. The Spark in the Embers. A crisis erupted that demanded my immediate attention. A cattle-rustling ring, led by a phantom known only as the Serpent, was hitting ranches all along the Red River. They were audacious, organized, and unnervingly well-informed, striking at night and vanishing like smoke, leaving behind only slaughtered guards and empty corrals. We had lost over 200 head in a month. An emergency meeting of the Cattlemen's Association was called in Austin, a 3-day ride away. It was a crucial gathering to form a united front, to hire rangers, and to stop the bleeding of our fortunes. I spent 2 days preparing, a whirlwind of furious energy. I barked orders at my foreman, a grizzled veteran named Gus, and buried myself in maps and reports, sleeping only a few hours a night. The honor of the stone name was at stake. In all my preparations, I barely spoke to Clara. I informed her of my departure as a matter of fact, not looking up from the papers on my desk as she brought me a plate of food I wouldn't touch. "I'll be gone for a week, perhaps longer," I said. "The Serpent's getting bolder. Gus knows what to do about the day-to-day. Be safe, Jedediah," was all she said. Her voice was calm, but I missed the flicker of concern in her eyes. I was too focused on the enemy without to notice the ally within. The week in Austin was a storm of tense negotiations and whiskey-fueled arguments. We hammered out a plan, pooling our resources to bring in the best trackers from the Arizona territories. I rode back feeling a grim satisfaction, my mind already calculating the costs and potential returns of our new security measures. As I crested the final hill overlooking the Stone Ranch, however, a strange sight met my eyes. The eastern pasture, which had been suffering from overgrazing for 2 seasons, had been sectioned off, the herd moved to the lusher northern fields. This was a rotation I had planned to implement for months, but had never found the time for. Further on, I saw a new line of fencing being dug near the river, reinforcing a weak point Gus and I had often worried about but had always put off. Most surprising of all, the broken water pump at the main well, which had been a source of constant frustration for my men, was chugging along with a steady, rhythmic beat. I spurred my horse, a sense of deep unease mixing with my curiosity. When I rode into the main yard, Gus was overseeing the loading of a wagon, not with the usual harried expression he wore in my absence, but with a look of calm efficiency. "What in the hell is going on, Gus?" I demanded, swinging down from my saddle, dust puffing from my boots. Gus turned, a slow, unadulterated grin spreading across his weathered face. "Welcome back, boss. Things have been productive." "Productive? Who authorized moving the herd? And that new fence? And who fixed that damned pump?" Gus's grin widened. He took off his hat and wiped his brow. "Well, boss, It's a bit of a story. First day you were gone, the missus came out to the fields. I'll admit it, I thought she was just gonna bring us lemonade. Instead, she had this old ledger. Her father's had notes on rainfall from the last 5 years. Soil composition reports said the eastern pasture would turn to dust if we didn't rest it. Laid out a rotation plan so simple and... He paused, chewing on his words. Then, she pointed out the river fence line, said it was a rustler's invitation. Drew up the plans herself. As for the pump, well, the boys were about to give up on it. She came over, watched for 10 minutes, then pointed to a valve we'd all overlooked. Said it just needed to be bled. Damned if she wasn't right. Been working like a dream since. He shook his head in wonder. Never seen anything like it. She don't command. She directs, quiet-like. But everyone listens. I was stunned into silence. I walked towards the house, my boots heavy with a feeling I couldn't name. It was a combination of shock, indignation, and a grudging, powerful admiration. That night, I found her in my study. My study. She was sitting in my leather chair, a stack of my financial reports on the desk beside her. She wasn't reading them. She was simply looking at the numbers, her expression thoughtful. "You're always working," she said, her voice breaking the silence. It wasn't the soft, meek tone I was used to. It was firm, almost challenging. "I have to make sure everything runs smoothly," I replied, my voice stiff, defensive. She rose from the chair and walked closer, her gaze never leaving mine. The air crackled with a new tension. But things weren't running smoothly, were they? The pasture was dying. The fence was weak. The pump was broken. You were so focused on the horizon, on the fight in Austin, that you were missing the dangers right here at home. Her words were a direct hit. She wasn't just a quiet observer. She had seen the flaws in my kingdom, the cracks in my armor. She had not only seen them, she had fixed them. "What if you're missing more than that?" she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Maybe you're so focused on the business of this ranch that you're missing the reason we're here." I didn't understand what she meant, not fully. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of something beyond respect. It was a raw, unnerving intrigue. Claire May Thompson, the woman I had dismissed as a pawn in my game, was speaking to me like an equal, like she saw something in me that I hadn't recognized myself. As she left the room, leaving me alone in the quiet of my own study, I couldn't help but wonder. What else was she hiding behind that calm exterior? And what, in God's name, was I going to do about it? Part 4. A Dangerous Alliance. The incident of my absence changed the landscape of our marriage. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was charged with unspoken questions and a new wary respect. I could no longer look at Clara and see a plain, dutiful wife. I saw a strategist, a mind as sharp as my own, perhaps even sharper in its attention to the subtle, vital details I often overlooked. I began, hesitantly at first, to seek her counsel. I'd spread the maps on the dining table after supper, a space previously reserved for silent meals, and point out a new grazing route or a potential water source. "What do you think?" I'd ask, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. She would study the maps, her finger tracing the contours of the land. Her suggestions were never what I expected. She thought in terms of seasons, not just quarters. She considered the health of the land as much as the weight of the cattle. Our discussions became debates, fiery, passionate arguments over strategy and resources. I would argue for aggressive expansion. She would counter with the need for sustainable growth. In the heat of our arguments, I saw a fire in her I never knew existed. Her eyes would flash. Her voice would gain a strength that captivated me. One night, arguing over water rights, I saw a flicker of a smile on her face. "What?" I demanded, annoyed. "You enjoy this," she stated simply. "The fight, the strategy. You've just never had a worthy opponent across your own table before." She was right, and the admission sent a jolt of something warm and dangerous through me. A few weeks later, our most important negotiation came to a head. We had to travel to the neighboring Double Creek Ranch. Their owner, a shrewd old man named Bartholomew, was considering selling a crucial parcel of land that would give us unparalleled access to the river. I had been negotiating with him for months with little success. This time I didn't just bring Clara out of obligation. I brought her as my secret weapon. The meeting was held in Bartholomew's dusty, smoke-filled office. I laid out my offer, a generous one. As expected, Bartholomew began his predictable refusal, leaning back in his chair with a dismissive wave. Before I could counter, Clara spoke up. "Mr. Bartholomew, my husband is a man of numbers," she said, her voice calm but clear, cutting through the thick air. "He sees acres and dollars. May I speak to the man who knows this land better than anyone?" Bartholomew, surprised, turned his full attention to her. "What's on your mind, little lady?" he grumbled, though his eyes held a new curiosity. "My father," she began, "always said your longhorns were the hardiest in the county. He told me a story once about the winter of '78. How you lost half your herd, but the half that survived became the foundation of the strongest stock in Texas. He said you had a gift for breeding what the land demanded." Bartholomew softened, a nostalgic light in his eyes. "Your father was a good man, knew his cattle." "He did," Clara agreed. "And he also knew this land. He said this parcel," she pointed to the map, "isn't valuable for grazing. The soil is too rocky. Its true value is the access. But for you, its value is sentimental. It's the last piece of your original homestead, the place where you and your wife first built your cabin." I watched, mesmerized, as she completely reframed the negotiation. She spoke of her own family's struggles, of the pain of losing land that had been in their blood for generations. She offered him not just a higher price, but a partnership. Lifetime grazing rights for his personal herd on our best land, and a promise to name the new territory the Bartholomew Pass. She made it about legacy, not about surrender. By the end of the hour, the old man had shaken my hand. A deal sealed, not by my cold logic, but by her empathetic strategy. My pride in her was a physical force, swelling in my chest. On the ride home, a new kind of silence settled between us. The sun was setting, painting the sky in strokes of orange and violet. We stopped by a small, clear creek to water the horses. As they drank, we stood side by side, not speaking. The air was thick with the scent of sagebrush and the sound of the crickets beginning their nightly chorus. I was intensely aware of her, of the space between us, of the way the fading light caught the red highlights in her brown hair. The pull I felt toward her was no longer just respect. It was a deep magnetic attraction. It was a terrifying, exhilarating feeling. My entire life was built on control, on predictable outcomes. Clara was a wildfire, and I was beginning to realize how much I wanted to stand in the flames. That night, I lay awake, listening to the sound of her steady breathing from the other side of the vast bed, and admitted a terrifying truth to myself. I was not her partner. I was not her husband in name only. I was becoming her captive. Part 5. The Stampede of the Heart. The realization that I was falling for Clara sent a tremor of pure panic through me. Love was a weakness. It was a chaotic, unpredictable force that had no place in the orderly empire I was building. It was the one variable my father had always warned me against, the one thing that could bring a strong man to his knees. And so, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I fought it. I ran. I built a wall around my heart, brick by painful brick. I threw myself into my work with a renewed, desperate ferocity. I took long, unnecessary trips to distant cattle markets, spent days on end out on the range, and filled my nights with ledgers and whiskey. Work was my shield, my excuse to avoid her presence, to escape the unnerving way her gaze seemed to see right through me. I became colder, more distant than I had been in the first days of our marriage. The cruelty of my withdrawal was sharpest in the small moments. One afternoon, she came to my study, her eyes bright with an idea. She had a new proposal for crop rotation in the kitchen gardens that would yield more produce for the ranch hands. She laid the drawings on my desk. I didn't even look at them. "I'm busy, Clara," I said, my voice flat and cold. "Leave the business of the ranch to me." The light in her eyes died. She quietly gathered her papers and left without another word. The victory felt like swallowing sand. I told myself it was for the best. This was a partnership of convenience, nothing more. The feelings I had were a temporary madness, a side effect of proximity that would fade if I simply starved them of oxygen. But deep down, I knew I was a liar. Every moment of distance was an agony. Every harsh word I spoke to her was a lash against my own soul. The warmth that had started to fill our home receded, replaced by the old familiar chill. And the silence between us was no longer charged with possibility. It was heavy with hurt. The breaking point came on a sweltering August evening. A storm was brewing on the horizon, the air thick and electric, mirroring the tempest inside me. I returned to the house late, exhausted and irritable after a dispute with a neighboring rancher. I found her on the porch, staring out at the darkening plains. "Long day?" she asked, her voice quiet. "They're all long days," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. I immediately regretted it, but the dam of my control was cracking. She stood up and faced me, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't back down. The hurt in her eyes was now mingled with a defiant fire. "Why have you been avoiding me, Jedediah?" The question hung in the air, a bolt of lightning before the thunder. "I'm not avoiding you," I lied, the words hollow. "I'm busy." "Don't lie to me," she said, her voice rising with a passion that stunned me. "You think I'm a fool? You think I haven't felt you pulling away? One minute, we are partners, building something together. The next, you look at me as if I'm a stranger you're forced to endure. Why? What did I do?" "You did nothing," I roared, the storm inside me finally breaking. "That's the problem. This was supposed to be simple. A contract, land for a name. It wasn't supposed to be this. What is this?" "Jedediah," she demanded, stepping closer, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Respect? A partnership? A man and a woman actually seeing each other for who they are? Is that so terrifying to you?" "Yes." The admission was torn from my throat. "It is. I have an empire to run. I have no time for feelings, for the weakness you bring out in me." Her face fell, the anger momentarily replaced by a look of profound pain. "Weakness," she whispered, the word like a shard of glass. "You think remembering a man's pride is weakness. You think caring for the land so it doesn't turn to dust is weakness. I thought it was strength. I thought it was stronger together. But I see now, you don't want a partner. You want a possession. A silent, obedient piece of property. Just like the cattle in your fields. Just like the mare your father shot because her broken leg was an inconvenience." The blood drained from my face. She knew that story. How? I had no idea. "You are just like him," she finished, her voice flat and devastating. The accusation struck me harder than any physical blow. It was my deepest fear, the one I had spent my entire life running from. I recoiled as if she had struck me, the anger draining out of me, replaced by a cold, horrifying shame. I had hurt her. I had taken this brilliant, fiery woman and tried to extinguish her light because I was afraid of my own heart. The stampede was over, and in the devastating silence, all I could see was the wreckage I had caused. Part 6. Unbridled. The silence that followed her words was more deafening than the argument. The storm outside finally broke, rain lashing against the roof in a furious rhythm. But the tempest between us had fallen into a dead, aching calm. Clara stood before me, her shoulders slumped, the fire in her eyes extinguished, leaving behind only the gray ash of disillusionment. She looked defeated, and it was my victory. A victory that felt exactly like death. "You're right," I said, my voice hoarse, broken. The admission cost me everything. My pride, my control, the armor I had worn my entire life. It all shattered and fell away, leaving me exposed and bleeding in the ruins. She looked up, surprise flickering in her pained eyes. "I am my father's son," I continued, The words a confession whispered into the storm. Or at least I've tried so hard to be. I was raised to believe that emotion is a fatal flaw, that love is a liability, that caring for anything that can't be branded and sold is a waste of time. My voice cracked. I saw what you were, what we were becoming, and it terrified me. Because it was the one thing I couldn't control, couldn't predict, couldn't fit into a ledger. I took a hesitant step toward her, my hands open at my sides in a gesture of surrender. What we have, it isn't weakness. It's the most powerful thing I've ever known. And I've been trying to destroy it because I'm a coward. I saw a tear trace a path through the dust on her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. How did you know about the mayor? I asked, the question barely audible. Gus told me, she said softly. He said he saw how you looked at Diablo. He said he knew you weren't all stone. The simple statement of faith from my old foreman, relayed by my wife, undid me completely. I closed the distance between us, my own eyes now burning with unshed tears. I didn't marry a plain woman for a piece of land, Clara. I see that now. I married a queen who was hiding in plain sight. You tamed my wildest horse. You saved my dying pastures. You won battles I couldn't win. You see the world in ways I'm blind to. You are not my weakness. You are the best and strongest part of me, and I have treated you like an enemy. I was standing before her now, the space between us charged with years of unspoken feelings. I'm in love with you, Clara May. It's a wild, terrifying, all-consuming love, and I've been fighting it like a fool. And in fighting it, I have wounded the only thing that has ever truly mattered. Her composure finally broke. A sob escaped her lips, a raw, wrenching sound. I thought you hated me, she cried, her voice thick with the loneliness of months. I felt myself disappearing, Jedediah, becoming that ghost you first saw. I was so afraid I would live my whole life as a bargain you regretted. Never, I whispered, reaching out and gently touching her face, my thumb brushing away a tear. You were the only part of the bargain that was real. She leaned into my touch, her body trembling. I love you too, Jedediah, she confessed, her eyes locking with mine, full of a fierce, forgiving light. I think I have from the moment I saw you try to reason with that stubborn bullheadedness of yours. I saw the good man you were fighting so hard to bury. I was just so afraid you would never let him out. I see you now, I said, my voice thick with emotion. God help me, I see you. The dam of restraint, of fear and pride, broke completely. I pulled her into my arms, crushing her against me as if I could physically merge our two souls. She wrapped her arms around my neck, holding on with a desperate strength that matched my own. The kiss was not gentle or tender. It was a storm. It was rain and thunder and lightning. It was all the arguments we'd ever had, and all the love we'd ever hidden, a desperate, passionate collision of two unbridled hearts that had finally stopped running. It was forgiveness. It was a promise. It was the beginning. In that moment, holding her with the rain washing the world clean around us, I wasn't a cattle baron or a son or a successor. I was just a man, finally, terrifyingly, and gloriously home. Part 6. Unbridled. The silence that followed her words was more deafening than the argument. The storm outside finally broke, rain lashing against the roof in a furious rhythm. But the tempest between us had fallen into a dead, aching calm. Clara stood before me, her shoulders slumped, the fire in her eyes extinguished, leaving behind only the gray ash of disillusionment. She looked defeated. And it was my victory, a victory that felt exactly like death. You're right, I said, my voice hoarse, broken. The admission cost me everything. My pride, my control, the armor I had worn my entire life. It all shattered and fell away, leaving me exposed and bleeding in the ruins. She looked up, surprise flickering in her pained eyes. I am my father's son, I continued, the words a confession whispered into the storm. Or at least, I've tried so hard to be. I was raised to believe that emotion is a fatal flaw. That love is a liability. that caring for anything that can't be branded and sold is a waste of time. My voice cracked. I saw what you were, what we were becoming, and it terrified me. Because it was the one thing I couldn't control, couldn't predict, couldn't fit into a ledger. I took a hesitant step toward her, my hands open at my sides in a gesture of surrender. What we have, it isn't weakness. It's the most powerful thing I've ever known. And I've been trying to destroy it because I am a coward. I saw a tear trace a path through the dust on her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. How did you know about the mayor? I asked, the question barely audible. Gus told me, she said softly. He said he saw how you looked at Diablo. He said he knew you weren't all stone. The simple statement of faith from my old foreman, relayed by my wife, undid me completely. I closed the distance between us, my own eyes now burning with unshed tears. I didn't marry a plain woman for a piece of land, Clara. I see that now. I married a queen who was hiding in plain sight. You tamed my wildest horse. You saved my dying pastures. You won battles I couldn't win. You see the world in ways I'm blind to. You are not my weakness. You are not my weakness. You are the best and strongest part of me, and I have treated you like an enemy. I was standing before her now, the space between us charged with years of unspoken feelings. I'm in love with you, Clara May. It's a wild, terrifying, all-consuming love, and I've been fighting it like a fool. And in fighting it, I have wounded the only thing that has ever truly mattered. Her composure finally broke. A sob escaped her lips, a raw, wrenching sound. I thought you hated me, she cried, her voice thick with the loneliness of months. I felt myself disappearing, Jedediah, becoming that ghost you first saw. I was so afraid I would live my whole life as a bargain you regretted. Never, I whispered, reaching out and gently touching her face, my thumb brushing away a tear. You were the only part of the bargain that was real. She leaned into my touch, her body trembling. I love you too, Jedediah, she confessed, her eyes locking with mine, full of a fierce, forgiving light. I think I have from the moment I saw you try to reason with that stubborn bull-headedness of yours. I saw the good man you were fighting so hard to bury. I was just so afraid you would never let him out. I see you now, I said, my voice thick with emotion. God help me, I see you. The dam of restraint, of fear and pride, broke completely. I pulled her into my arms, crushing her against me as if I could physically merge our two souls. She wrapped her arms around my neck, holding on with a desperate strength that matched my own. The kiss was not gentle or tender. It was a storm. It was rain and thunder and lightning. It was all the arguments we'd ever had, and all the love we'd ever hidden. A desperate, passionate collision of two unbridled hearts that had finally stopped running. It was forgiveness. It was a promise. It was the beginning. In that moment, holding her with the rain washing the world clean around us, I wasn't a cattle baron or a son or a successor. I was just a man, finally, terrifyingly, and gloriously home. Our story became a quiet legend in that part of Texas. The story of the cold cattle baron and the silent wife who was anything but. We built an empire together, not just of land and cattle, but of a partnership forged in fire and a love as wild and enduring as the land itself. I learned the most important lesson of my life, not in a boardroom or on a cattle drive, but in the eyes of the woman I once dismissed. The greatest treasures are not the ones we conquer, but the ones we are brave enough to surrender to. True strength isn't found in building walls around your heart, but in having the courage to tear them down for the right person. Our love was a testament to the untamed spirit of the West, a reminder that even in the harshest landscapes, the most beautiful things can grow. Thank you for joining us on Wild West Stories. If you enjoyed our tale, please consider subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who loves a good story. We have many more tales from the frontier waiting for you. Until next time, ride safe. Our story became a quiet legend in that part of Texas. The story of the cold cattle baron and the silent wife who was anything but. We built an empire together, not just of land and cattle, but of a partnership forged in fire and a love as wild and enduring as the land itself. I learned the most important lesson of my life not in a boardroom or on a cattle drive, but in the eyes of the woman I once dismissed. The greatest treasures are not the ones we conquer, but the ones we are brave enough to surrender to. True strength isn't found in building walls around your heart, but in having the courage to tear them down for the right person. Our love was a testament to the untamed spirit of the West, a reminder that even in the harshest landscapes, the most beautiful things can grow. Thank you for joining us on Wild West Stories. If you enjoyed our tale, please consider subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who loves a good story. We have many more tales from the frontier waiting for you. Until next time, ride safe.